Hello again, everybody. This is Craig Evans of Autism Hangout, and thank you for tuning into this Autism Hangout special report. Today's guest is yet another baby boomer that was diagnosed later on in life, and at age 52, she learned the news. As the mom of kids also on the spectrum, she'd watched them encounter the same inclusion issues that had challenged her earlier. But as a successful artist, she was now capable of taking matters into her own hands and making a difference. Being a successful photographer, through her medium, she tells stories of being a part of something or being apart from something. Big difference. Autism Hangout, please welcome today's guest, photographer and author Jane Strauss. Welcome, Jane. Great to have you here.
Hi, Craig. Great to be here.
I love stories about people finding out later on in life they're on the spectrum, but they've already proven how successful they are. They've taken their talents and gifts and used the gifts of autism to succeed in life. And you were one of those people, Jane.
Okay.
I can see you're humble too. I like that. Let's talk a little bit about being diagnosed at age 52. Was this a surprise to you?
Not really. I had been at the College of Education at the university years and years, decades ago, in the early 80s when Catherine Lord was teaching there, and people in the autism world know who Catherine Lord is. Back in about 80 or 81, I took a graduate seminar in autism. And as Dr. Lord was teaching about, well, there's all these odd things that people with autism do, I was looking at it and going, really? Everybody doesn't do that when they're a kid? Wow. But since I was the only undergrad in the class, everybody else was a practicing teacher or somebody in a PhD program or master's program in psychology, even I was bright enough not to say, hey, I think I am. Later on in that decade, I got married, I started having some kids. My one who spun and flapped the most did get services from the county for early intervention under mental retardation and related services. Yeah. She subsequently graduated with high honors from the university and SOMA from the Carlson School with a master's in human resources.
Have you always been a photographer?
Not really. I did it when I was a kid. I loved it. And I actually only started doing photography in '04, right about a year or so before I ended up with my diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what motivated you then as a newfound photographer to actually do a story on inclusion?
Started out as a social story for my son Rafi. At the time he was about 9 and was having a great deal of difficulty behaving in a manner that wasn't disruptive to everybody at synagogue. So I started out by taking him to synagogue on a day that wasn't Sabbath so I could take pictures and writing a social story for him. Went from there to looking at trying to get funding to do an exhibit of the photos, because when I turned them from color into black and white, they really looked great, and I could see them on a wall. Shelley Christensen, who's the inclusion coordinator and parent of a son with Asperger's at the Jewish community, Jewish Family and Children's Service, suggested that maybe I might want to find some other people and do a story on inclusion generally. So I ended up having finding 7 or 8 other people, some of whom are on the autism spectrum, some of whom are not, and putting together an exhibit that I submitted to the Jewish Community Center out in St. Louis Park for a hallway exhibit. At that point, it got a lot of got some press, it got some responses from people saying, wow, if this was only in a book, so it could go other places. I tried to put it in a book and develop some discussion guides about inclusion, what is inclusion, what isn't inclusion, and specifically in a faith community, because that's what my pictures were.
Both you and the book have been noticed by people. I know that there's been an article in Women's Press. Can you talk a little bit about what that article entailed?
Sure. The article in Women's Press actually started out being about one of my specialties, I guess, one of my strong interests, that's what they call them.
Yeah.
As an Asperger person, I've always really liked classic cars. It's one of my collection things. And so one of the types of images that I do with my photography are classic cars, particularly their mascots and their details. I was invited to participate in a show, which is the largest automotive art show in the country called Velocity 2 out at the Hopkins Center for the Arts. It was as a result of that the Women's Press asked to use one of my images on the cover of their July issue. And they interviewed me and talked about the neurological difference and how it contributes to my art. And I said, hey, and I did this book. So I gave them some review copies of the two books, actually. One is the images from the art show, and the other is a series of 3 discussion guides.
Who are the audiences for your book?
I originally expected them to be parochial schools, churches, synagogues, mosques. And that's really what I designed it for. Mm-hmm. It has, however, been purchased by the patient relations department at the university to use with some of their clinics and talk about differences.
Mm-hmm. Is this something you think teachers, educators could use?
Oh, absolutely. Because one of the problems that I've run into with my youngest son is that often schools think that they're including and they're not. For example, if you've got a kid who's in pull-out every time except for lunch, mm-hmm. and you're not actively working to help him be included with the people at lunch, you're not including him. You're providing a separate and unequal program, and it sucks.
Yeah. How can people find more information out about your book?
There's a website, of course. Mm-hmm. It is www.a-part-or-apart.com.
What words of wisdom could you offer anybody that has not seen this book?
That's a toughie. But I would say generally, people who have any kind of special need, any kind of disability, or are different in any way, do not want a bone thrown to them in another room. We just want to be able to live our lives and choose if we want to be in the same place as other people. If you are a member of a church or a synagogue or a mosque, and your church or synagogue or mosque is, quote, including people by having a, quote, special program, close quotes, in that other room at that particular time, however, people get upset when someone makes a noise in your service, you need to look at what your motivations are. And if your motivations are, oh gosh, I feel so sorry for them, we ought to provide something, that's called pity. If your motivations are, even as you do to the least of these, you do for me, that's called charity. If your motivations are, hey, we all benefit when different kinds of people are in part of our whole, and we're going to be like Abraham, who had just had his circumcision, was in pain, was sitting outside his tent, got up and ran across the desert to welcome 3 strangers, that's hospitality, and that's inclusion.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Jane, thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for actually taking your vocation and turning it into an avocation, or did I say that right? Thank you so much for taking your
taking my hobby and turning it into real life so that people can be helped.
Thank you for doing that. It made a big difference, and it will continue to make a difference. Hopefully, if you've got another art show or another book coming up, we can chat about it then too.
Thank you so much, Craig. Look forward to talking with you later.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Autism Hangout. I'll be back again soon with another special report.